Good evening and welcome to Qnews Economic Bulletin, and we bring you the latest top economic stories along with expert analysis on the events and trends shaping the regional and global economy. Throughout our coverage, we spotlight key sectors and highlight the defining economic developments of the moment. To start with the latest headlines, we hand it over to my colleague Henny Saif for the top economic stories. Henny, what do you have for us today?
That's right, Hela. We have plenty of news and developments from around the world. And we start off with the global projections as the Bank of America has raised its global growth forecast, citing easing energy prices following the Iran ceasefire and continued strength in Asia's AI-driven exports. The bank now expects global GDP to grow 3.2% in 2026 and 3.5% in 2027. Up from 3.1% and 3.4% respectively. It also lowered its Brent crude price forecast to $72 a barrel in the second half of 2026 and $65 in 2027, reducing its global inflation outlook to 3% in 2026, 2.4% in 2027 and 2.5% in 2028. However, the bank warned that the inflation shock from the Iran conflict has not been fully reversed and expects the U.S. Federal Reserve to raise interest rates by a total of 75 basis points this year, starting September. In Europe, the European Central Bank data has shown that bank lending to Eurozone companies grew at its fastest annual pace in 3 years in May, extending the steady recovery in credit demand. Loans to non-financial corporations rose 4% year-on-year, up from 3.4% in April, while household lending edged up to 3.1% from 3%. Meanwhile, the broad M3 money supply grew 3.2%, accelerating from 2.7% in April. The Spanish Economy Minister Carlos Cuerpo Caballero reported that the government has raised its 2026 GDP growth forecast to 2.6% from 2.2%. with the second quarter growth expected to match or slightly exceed the first quarter. Now, he noted the temporary measures to cushion the impact of the Iran conflict on prices will be extended by 3 months, while the energy production tax will be reduced from 7% to 3.5% in 2028 and eliminated in 2029. The government forecasts gross domestic product growth of 2.2% in 2027. 2.1% in 2028 and 2% in 2029. Expects the unemployment rate to fall to 8.5% by 2029 and projects the budget deficit to narrow from 2.4% of GDP in 2025 to 2.1% in 2026 and 1.8% in 2027. In Asia, the Economy Ministry has revealed that Japan's retail sales rose for a third consecutive month in May, supported by strong wage growth and government cost of living subsidies. Retail sales increased 1.9% year-on-year, following an upwardly revised gain in April. However, the data also suggested consumers are becoming more price conscious, with drugstore sales rising more than 7%, while growth in higher-priced convenience store sales slowed, indicating a shift towards lower-cost purchases. In markets and technology, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has unveiled a sweeping industrial strategy centered on semiconductors and artificial intelligence, backed by 800 trillion won in investment from Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix and their suppliers. Now, the plan includes the construction of 4 new memory chip fabrication plants, with SK Hynix accelerating in its Yongin semiconductor cluster by 12 years and bringing forward around 600 trillion won in DRAM investment, alongside 100 trillion for NAND expansion. Lee described the initiative as a great leap forward, built on the pillars of semiconductors, physical AI, and data centers, aiming to strengthen South Korea's global technology leadership while promoting more balanced regional economic growth.
안정되고 값싼 용지가 풍부한 지역을 새로운 사이트로.
Goldman Sachs has reported that U.S. companies are poised for another strong earnings season, driven by the ongoing AI investment boom and robust profits from energy companies. The bank expects S&P 500 second quarter earnings to grow 22%, with AI infrastructure firms contributing nearly 60% of earnings per share growth. Goldman estimates that NVIDIA and Micron Technology alone could account for more than 40% of that increase. It further noted that the upcoming earnings season is expected to be a key catalyst for U.S. equities, as investors assess whether AI investments beyond the major hyperscalers are beginning to generate meaningful returns. The Financial Times has reported that Google has limited Meta's access to its Gemini AI models after the social media company requested more computing capacity than Google could provide. The shortfall has disrupted and delayed some of Meta's internal AI projects, prompting the company to encourage employees to use AI tokens more efficiently. The report added that several other Google customers have also faced capacity constraints, though Meta has been affected the most due to its exceptionally high demand for Gemini models. Global markets were mixed in trading, with modest gains in the United States and Asia, contrasted by sharp declines in Europe. Now, in the US, the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.48%. Nasdaq futures rocketed 1.6%, and the S&P 500 hiked 0.91%. Across Asia, Japan's Nikkei edged up 0.15%, the Shanghai Composite surged 1.16%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index soared 1.57%. Meanwhile, in Europe, the UK's FTSE 100 slipped 0.23%, France's CAC 40 fell 0.21%, and Germany's DAX dropped 0.18%. In the energy sector, oil prices gained more than 1% on Monday after attacks by the US and Iran underscored the fragility of their interim peace deal. While cautious hopes of a continued recovery in energy shipping through the Strait of Hormuz limited gains. Brent crude futures were up 1.25% at $72.89 a barrel. The U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude gained 1.73% to $70.43 a barrel. And gold prices fell on Monday as fresh U.S.-Iran tensions lifted oil prices and sparked fears of inflation, bolstering expectations of higher interest rates. Spot gold slid 1.5% to $4,025.83 an ounce, after falling more than 2% earlier in the session and hitting a more than 7-month low last week. U.S. gold futures for August delivery fell 1.4% to $4,040.7. Meanwhile, the U.S. dollar was headed for its biggest monthly gain in nearly a year. A stronger dollar makes gold more expensive for overseas buyers. Among other metals, spot silver slid 1.8% to $58.11 an ounce. Those were the economic and financial stories we have for this hour, but now we go back to Hela Al-Hamilawi in our studio. Hela.
Thank you so much, Henny. And now to a more in-depth analysis, as the UK could soon see a change in leadership, with Andy Burnham currently the only declared candidate to succeed Keir Starmer and potentially become Prime Minister as soon as next month. His proposed agenda of welfare reform, fiscal discipline, house building and industrial support could have significant implications for the UK's economic outlook, public finances and also investment climates. Let's take a closer look. UK Labour's Andy Burnham has stated that his government would reduce the welfare bill through fair and lasting reforms that help people into work rather than penalise those in need. Speaking in his first address since returning to Westminster after winning a parliamentary seat, Burnham said that tackling the housing crisis through a major council house building programme would also help ease pressure on public finances. He added that Labour would not take risks with the public finances and would expand 45-day work placements and apprenticeships to improve employment opportunities.
And successors according to law. So help me God.
Moreover, UK Labour's Andy Burnham also pledged to strengthen Britain's industrial base by safeguarding strategic sectors including steel, defence, energy, food and farming, while giving UK-based companies a better chance of securing public contracts. He noted that a taxpayer-first approach would guide defence investment, business rates would be reformed to support restaurants and high streets, and a 10-year plan would aim to reduce the cost of essential services. Burnham also proposed new good growth funds for local areas, greater public control over services such as water and a number 10 North to drive regional economic development.
Who can use it best. And in so doing, creating a new sense of agency, possibility and... Thank you, everyone. I am going to do things differently.
For further analysis, we're joined from London by economist Mrs. Vicky Price. Welcome to Q News. Now, Mrs. Price, Andy Burnham has pledged to reduce the welfare bill through what he called fair and lasting reforms that encourage people into work rather than cutting benefits. Can this approach deliver meaningful fiscal savings while also boosting labour market participation?
I think it should over a period of time if it's done properly. There is no doubt that quite a lot of people are inactive and the benefit bill has gone up very significantly and it needs to be tackled. The question is how you reduce that bill, and if you're doing it by encouraging more people to go into work through support, also giving some subsidies to workers, for workers, to businesses that employ them, which has already in fact started being the policy of the current government anyway. I mean, that is a possibility that way you could have an impactful effect on the bill that we have to put up with every year on welfare and benefit system in particular, which of course, if anything, is due to go up very, very significantly unless something is done. The issue is how long it takes for that for the measures that may need to be implemented to do it fairly. Because again, if you listen to his speech, he talks about cutting welfare in a fair way. For that to be fair, one needs to be giving people a lot of opportunity to retrain, start learning something also if they are engaged in a firm as apprentice, perhaps. That will take time to have the impact on the cost that you want to see being reduced. And that will be the trick, the balancing act that needs to be made between spending on other things and cutting at the same time welfare spending from where it would otherwise be. That's not an easy one, I'm afraid. So good words, but the implementation and the details of how that would be done are going to be key.
Definitely. Well, Burnham also argues that a major council house building program will help ease both the housing crisis and pressure on public finances. How realistic is this strategy, and what economic impact could it have on growth, productivity, and the construction sector?
I mean, the truth is that social housing, so council houses in other words, have hardly been built in the last few decades, and that's been a serious problem in the UK. Yes, we talk about affordable housing, but still it means that the rents that go on, that are charged by affordable housing, if that's what we want to call them in inverted commas, are still higher than what council tenants are paying. What this means is that for those who can't afford it, even if you build affordable housing, then they rely on housing benefit, which of course means that the cost is quite significant to cover the rents for that housing that people are forced to get into, if you like, even if it is affordable in inverted commas. So if you're able to have proper social housing, council housing, where you build for rent, but for council rent, then yes, it costs. At the same time, it reduces the need to finance the cost of living for people who are relying on that housing. So it can work. There is some money available. There was already 39 billion that had been pledged between now and the end of this parliament. So we're talking about 29-30. Who knows when an election might, of course, take place. But over that period, 39 billion was pledged for affordable housing. Well, that can, of course, be turned into council housing. You asked what it will mean for house builders. Whichever way it is, if there is more building to be done, which the government pays for or local councils pay for, then, of course, it's the developers who will produce that housing. The question, of course, is how easy it is to produce housing which is relatively cheap to rent, and keeping also to all the regulations that now exist in terms of net zero, and also preserving spaces, green spaces, and so on. So there are tricky issues to consider, but it is welcome that there will be a focus on council housing, which is something that the UK has missed out on for a long time now.
Well, the Labour also plans to expand 45-day work placements and apprenticeships to improve employment opportunities. Could these measures help address the UK's skills shortage and raise long-term productivity, in your own opinion?
Yes, I think it should help, but of course, we start from a basis where quite a lot of people are not in employment or training right now, and that's a real issue. So if you can reduce the number of these people who are, as we call them, NEETs, not in employment, education or training, and that is something like 21% of the labour force who could be there and doing something quite major. So if you look at that number and you think of ways in which you can encourage these people to get some of the training, maybe not through formal education, but certainly through apprenticeships and training in companies, then you can give them the skills, particularly when they're young, to develop those skills for the future, to do whatever else they may need to do, which is pretty common sense. But again, that takes a bit of time, but that we do need to tackle that issue of skills, particularly now that we're changing those skills, need to think more about computer skills, AI, and of course, new industries that may be emerging on the green side. You do absolutely need to have these people active. If you leave them non-active for too long, then productivity suffers.
Definitely. Burnham has also pledged to reform business rates and strengthen support for strategic industries such as steel, defence, energy, food and farming. How could these policies reshape the UK's industrial base and competitiveness?
Well, it's quite interesting, really, because we have had an industrial strategy which was published a little while ago. And that industrial strategy, of course, covers some of the sectors you just mentioned, but it's focusing also on life sciences and advanced manufacturing. So we are talking about quite a considerable effort already being made to target a number of sectors. What quite a lot of people felt, though, was that areas with relatively low productivity, such as retail and hospitality, and also what happens on our high streets, have been neglected to a considerable extent, where loads of jobs have been lost. What Andy Burnham, interestingly enough, focused on, which is very welcome, is how to rejuvenate the high streets. And you mentioned business rates. One of the things which is, of course, affecting quite a lot of pubs and restaurants and the retail sector has been this increase in business rates that a number of companies are facing. And of course, that is affecting the high street quite significantly. It affects the cohesion of society. He wants to put a lot more emphasis on that and getting that rebuilt, if you like. When you talk about other sectors like steel, I mean, that's the real worrying one, because yes, you want to preserve a vibrant steel sector in the UK because you need it for strategic reasons. At the same time, however, this government so far has imposed steel tariffs for things coming in from elsewhere in order to support the steel sector here. Unfortunately, that is covering quite a lot of steel inputs, which manufacturing needs, which even the sectors which are using a lot more advanced manufacturing are dependent on. So it's raising costs. And that's another, if you like, balancing that needs to be done to ensure that, yes, of course, we want to preserve those strategic sectors, but not at the expense of maybe putting loads more costs on across a wide range of sectors which are going to be badly affected.
Yes. The Labour wants to give British-based companies a greater share of public contracts. What economic benefits could this bring? And are there any risks of higher costs or even trade disputes?
Yes, it's always a question mark, whether you want to be completely open. So when you do procurement, whether you go for the cheapest, which is what has tended to happen in the UK for quite a few decades now, or whether you also are worried about supporting your local industry at the same time. And of course, there are some sectors where we absolutely need to look at the UK, such as defence, where there are companies that could provide quite a lot of the inputs that are necessary for the extra spending on defence that we need. So we need to be mindful of that, but not, of course, overdo it in such a way that we don't take advantage of more productive sectors that might exist elsewhere, inputs that could come from other countries. So yes, being slightly protective might give us a bit of an edge for a while to build up some of the capability that we need. But generally, one needs to be quite cautious about what the implications of all this would be. But within that, if I may say, the important thing is the smaller firms. Quite a lot of SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises in areas like even construction and house building have gone out of business. So looking at that again and making sure that they have a share in whatever framework agreements there may be for bringing in those companies whenever you're doing any construction projects. I think it needs to include a percentage of smaller firms. And I think various governments have said they would do that and they would try to do that. You find that actually in practice it doesn't happen. So I think that needs a lot of focus of attention for the future.
Mrs. Price, now, if Andy Burnham succeeds Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, how do you expect financial markets and investors to react? Which sectors are likely to benefit or even face challenges under his economic agenda?
But for the moment, the markets have been reasonably sanguine, just waiting to see. The reality is that we don't know yet who is going to be the Chancellor, in other words, the Minister of Finance. There are a number of possibilities. Markets may worry if the person who gets appointed to that job is one who may want to spend a lot of money to, particularly if on easing some of the pressures that Andy Burnham has identified are affecting quite large parts of the country outside London. And that is going to be quite costly. I think they're going to be looking quite carefully at what the implications of some of the announcements today of what he intends to do will mean, such as devolution of lots of powers, including economic powers, to different regions and away from London, and what the implications of that would be. And the reason why one needs to look at that very carefully, and the markets will want to look at that very carefully, and we look at particular sectors too, is because, of course, London and the southeast of England are the two areas that make the only areas that make a positive contribution to the finances of the UK, and we're basically from London and the southeast paying for the rest of the UK, which are not really able to be net contributors to the UK's finances. So one has to watch how that is done. So you talked about sectors. The financial sector is very important, of course. In London, business services are very important in London. So one has to just be careful one doesn't affect all these areas, too much when one is trying to redirect resources elsewhere.
Well, from London, that was economist Mrs. Vicky Price. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. Now we turn to fans' favorite as attention remains on the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Now, the FIFA World Cup is no longer only a battle for the trophy. It has become a global business involving billions of dollars, advanced technology, changing fan habits, and even new challenges for teams and the organizers as well. From AI shaping the way that the game is played to federations managing the cost of competing in the biggest stage. Now the economies behind football are taking a bigger role than ever. Here is a look at the business stories unfolding beyond the pitch. A World Cup exit usually means the end of a team's dream, but for federations it can also mean a sudden change in plans and budgets. From cancelled charter flights to millions in prize money, every decision after elimination has a financial impact. Here is the story.
The 2026 FIFA World Cup is the richest tournament in football history. With a record prize fund of $871 million, every nation that qualified was guaranteed at least $12.5 million before a ball was kicked, with additional rewards based on tournament performance. But early exits have revealed another side of the tournament's economics. Uruguay's journey home became a talking point after the federation cancelled plans for a private charter flight following their group stage elimination, with players and staff returning on commercial flights instead. Saudi Arabia also drew attention after reports said 20 players chose to leave separately, while the team's official aircraft returned carrying the remaining delegation and equipment. Small logistical decisions, but they highlight a bigger reality behind football's biggest event. A World Cup campaign requires months of preparation and major spending, from training camps and accommodation to staff, transportation, and operations. FIFA's record payments provide important financial support, but federations still have to manage the cost of running a team at a global tournament, because every additional match changes the whole equation. A longer run means more exposure, stronger sponsorship value, and greater commercial opportunities. For some associations, a deep World Cup journey can become a financial boost. For others, an early exit means adjusting plans quickly and controlling costs. At the World Cup, success is not only measured by how far a team goes on the pitch, it is also measured by how the business behind the team adapts when the journey ends.
For further analysis on this topic, we're joined from Beirut by financial market analyst at First Financial Markets, Mr. Daniel El-Banna. Welcome, Mr. Daniel, to Qnews. Hope you're enjoying the tournament so far. Now, the World Cup is generating record financial distributions this year, but cases like Uruguay's charter decision show another side of the tournament. How do federations balance the financial rewards with the costs of running a World Cup campaign?
Greetings to you and to the audience. Thank you for having me here today. Yeah, of course, World Cup is just a business at the end of the day. It is a huge business which can generate a lot of revenues, and of course, there is a huge cost. What's really happening is each country, let's say they are qualified, they got paid like some millions in order to transfer the team, to do some camps, to do tickets and etc. However, the main problem is related to the federation. When they want to raise those money and how they raise it in a way and how to split it. What's really happening is some countries, like as you mentioned, related to Uruguay and how they came back on a commercial flight, due to many factors. Since the way of splitting it and the revenue related to it, it's a business in the end of the world. So in the end of the day, so let's say they got transferred, they are going to there. They made money, by the way, just for entering the World Cup rounds, first round. So they need to cover those expenses and to make money in the end. So let's say they exited from round one, they need to make some money, so they try to lower the cost. I want to share here that World Cup, as we all enjoying it, and I am enjoying it a lot, especially due to those matches. However, it's a business wise. FIFA is making a huge money from it. A lot of companies making money from it. So World Cup is for entertainment, and it's an economy inside this World Cup.
Well, how significant are logistical decisions such as choosing charter flights versus commercial travel when federations manage their tournament budgets?
Of course, when they give their budgets, let's say we have a couple of millions, let's say, they try to the operation, it's the responsibility of the operational that they try to, that they should first of all try to minimize the cost, try to make the team comfortable, since they need to have a good mindset before playing. In addition to that, they need to focus on the entry and on the exit, how they might exit, especially if they exit from round 1, round 2, from round 16, or let's say from semi-finals. So they need to do this scenario as a feasibility study. How much we are spending, how much we can get from it, how much is the cost, and if we qualify to the semi-finals, how much we can make money for it. And we should not forget that if we are, let's say, if this country qualified to the semi-finals, so which means they need more expenses as they are staying, let's say, now in the US. Those is the responsibility for the operational team. However, what really happened related to Uruguay is their operations unfortunately weren't so good. They were like spending some expenses, spending money related to this. So when they exited, they need to generate some, let's say, return of it, and that's why they made this decision. Which, by the way, it is okay. This is not a good decision, but it's not the end of the world. So it was a cost basis decision.
Well, every participating team receives guaranteed FIFA payments, but how much does advancing further in the tournament change the financial picture for a national association?
Yes, you mean when you qualify, you mean for the semi-finals and finals, you get more money, right? That's what you mean? Okay, yeah. So what's really there is, if you qualify to the semi-finals and finals, there's a lot of millions of dollars, let's say, related to this, which each country or each team it is a target, by the way, related to their financials. So when there's a manager, there is a financial target related to this. So when you advance to the semi-finals or quarter-finals, there's a profit this country can make, especially if you qualify to the finals. There are huge money, to be honest, related to the finals. So in this case, in the end, as I mentioned, it is a business. The team are playing, we are entertained. However, there are many responsibilities related to profits, related to expenses. Even the FIFA need to make money in the end. So it's this entertainment. It's just an economy. It reflects a economic word inside the World Cup, which is an amazing economic word, especially for a person that he focus on finance and especially on focus on football. So I am enjoying both, by the way, and there are a huge, by the way, economic opportunities and opportunities related to those World Cup, which let's say they need to do more, and especially related to FIFA, they are doing great by how they are doing it right now. However, there should be more operational faults, plans, since they are increasing costs, unfortunately, especially when we are playing outside of the US, due to the cost of travel, which is affecting, by the way, not just the players, but it's affecting also the audience that they are there.
Definitely. But beyond the prize money, what are the biggest financial benefits of staying longer in the World Cup? Sponsorship, value, exposure, commercial partnerships, or something else?
Of course, staying in semifinals or to finals, it is they can make exposure, especially players. By the way, a lot of players were found in the World Cup, and they shined there, and that's why they got to play it into other, like for example into other Real Madrid or Barcelona, for example Mbappe and other players when they were young, even Neymar. So the World Cup is a place where you can find a real player and a skilled player, which a lot of managers, by the way, they are monitoring those things, and they are monitoring each team and each player inside each team in order to decide for where if they want to, let's say, bring them to their club. So it is not just about money, it's about exposure and about, of course, sponsorship. As sponsorship, when you enter into a team, let's say for example Germany or Brazil, right now it's playing Brazil, so imagine Brazil coming to the finals and they are facing, let's say on for example facing Germany or facing Argentina. So there will be a huge ads and sponsors, especially from the companies that we want to pay millions of dollars just to be shown in this match. So imagine if there are huge matches like Argentina, Germany, Brazil, other countries, Spain. So this is also a real benefit, by the way, and the companies, they can benefit from their ads, especially in a tough match. Like for example, today we have Morocco and Spain. So people are waiting for it. Of course, companies are waiting for it to make money by doing some ads in the match, and in the same time related to those clubs that they can sponsor. Some companies sponsor, let's say, a drink, for example, related to Pepsi, to Red Bull. So a huge, by the way, sponsors, they are paying huge money. So it is, as I mentioned, economy inside the World Cup, which companies are making money, FIFA are making money, teams are making money, and of course we are entertained, which is, in my opinion, the best for me, as to be entertained, especially in those tough matches.
Mm-hmm. When we look at the modern World Cup, is success now measured not only by results on the pitch, but also by how well a federation manages the business side of the tournament?
Exactly. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, it's not just about players coming and play. Now it is more about how you should manage the operations, how you should manage the team inside the match. Even it's not just a tactics right now or strategy inside the match. It's also about operations, financials, since they want to, in the end, they want to generate money, so they try to lower cost. So we are unfortunately, the modern World Cup is about making money and about not just entertainment, but it's about making money. If we go back, let's say, to years ago, for example, when also in other countries, let's say back to 2022 in Russia, In Qatar, I mean, so in 2018 in Russia. So they changed the modern of
Yes.
World Cup. It changed, to be honest, and they are focusing not on the pitch. They are focusing on making money from it.
Yes. Well, from Beirut, that was financial market analyst at First Financial Markets, Mr. Daniel Al-Banna. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our economic bulletin for today. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned to Q News for the latest updates from around the world, from the worlds of business, finance, and global affairs. And don't forget to follow our coverage during the World Cup, where we will go beyond the action on the pitch to explore the business of the tournament, from sponsorships and investments to tourism, trade, and the economic impact of the world's biggest sporting event. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a very great day.